So I left off talking about Europeans that freak out about GMOs because uh, I don't think, I think there is a sense that they don't like that the seeds are genetically modified, but it's more that the pesticides are sprayed onto the crops and then we just buy them and eat them. That's what they're freaking out about. So, global food trade and, some of the things about sustainable agriculture, we could actually help Africa so much by saying, here, take our genetically modified seeds. But the reason they don't want to do them is one, you use those seeds, but then you have to buy the seeds, the next year. We actually breed them now. The big corporations breed them so that the seeds are used one season and then they code out, all right? And I know that's a simplified thing, but you have to continue buying from them. So the Africans are like, we don't like that. We like the old-fashioned way where we hold some seed back and plant the new crop. But the other thing is they want to sell to Europe, and Europe won't touch our GMOs. So Africa's in this dilemma that they can't feed themselves right now, but someday they want to be able to sell to the Europeans, and they are in some extent. Flowers, goat, things like that, okay? So in the next slides, we're going to be talking about all of these things.
So the AP exam refers to this as a stimulus. So you will get, on your first question, you're going to get 2 stimuli, and they're going to want you to use that. And then on your second question, you get 1 stimuli, 1 stimulus. And one of the things they want you to do is to be able to look at it, interpret it, and then use it in your question. So if we look at this, it says population, billions of people up here, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 billion people, okay? And then it has years down here, and then different colored lines. So the food production line, you notice, is going up and up and up. Same as the population, okay? Usually we look at trends, right, in these types of things. Now, if you were just to look at this, and then agricultural land, you can see the amount of agricultural land has basically stayed the same. So what do you interpret from this? What are you supposed to gather from this? Well, if we didn't have the blue line, if you just had the red and the purple, you'd be like, Malthus was right. Look, we have the same amount of agricultural land, population's outpacing agricultural land. Well, okay, but they give us another line, and that says food production. So even though we have the same or even starting to decline the amount of agricultural land, we are producing more food, and way more food, or more food than the rate of population growth, okay? So food production has way outpaced the population growth. All right, this one is talking about threats to farmland in Maryland. Okay, so you're a developer. You're going to put a brand new shopping mall in someplace. What kind of topography do you want? What kind of land do you want? Well, generally, you're going to want flat land, okay, that has good drainage on it. So you're going to want to, because you're going to have to put pipes underneath the ground. You're going to want to put buildings on top of things. And in order to do that, it's just a lot easier if that land is flat. So here's another scenario. You're a farmer. You're going to create a farm. What kind of land do you want? Well, you want flat land. You want land that has good drainage, just like the developer. And so what's happening is, because we're being more productive with the amount of agricultural land that we have, farmers are losing out to developers. And so we're starting to see the loss of agricultural land. And you can see that here in Maryland. It's happening in Maryland. We're pretty familiar with this in Lodi. The Costco area, the Reynolds Ranch area, all that used to be vineyard. The area that's by Raley's, that new development over there. Okay, so we're starting to lose agricultural land, but at the same time, we're still being so productive with what we have that we're producing, in fact, more than enough food. Okay, at least here in a level 4 country. All right, this was talking about desertification. Mr. Wright talked about it a little bit earlier. The Sahel Desert. This tends to happen in dry regions. It happens for a couple of reasons. One is because people over farm. In some areas, you can imagine if you're very hungry, you're going to try to plant as much of the land as you possibly can. That could lead to over farming, where there's no crop cover. and they tend to get winds out here. If there's no crop cover holding the topsoil down, you could lose 2-3 inches of really valuable topsoil that you need to grow crops in. And so what will happen is after a year or two, that land is no longer farmable. It's just essentially a desert. Okay, so you can see up here in China, okay, we don't always expect China to be so dry like Mr. Wright was talking about. Remember, it could happen up here, okay, in this part of Asia. Australia is incredibly dry. You guys know from the fires that took place last year, okay? So part of what can happen with that desertification, I hope I explained it correctly, over farming can lead to it. High winds can actually spread that desert and cause it to grow, okay?
Okay. Alrighty, so Malthus, he was worried that we weren't going to produce food fast enough. We're producing it fast enough for the growing population. That's great. Okay, so you can see agricultural production has increased faster than farmland, but there's the catch. How much available land? So there's this balance between, what we're doing to the environment to get all of this food out of it. So you see in poorer areas that more people, populations are growing, so more people are farming, and they're farming on marginal land that really should just be covered with the natural vegetation, meaning they strip it all off. You have a good rain year, great, you have a crop. But then the next year you have a dry year, and now it becomes, desertification, okay? And they're going to get some of that back, but they're not going to get all of it back. They're going to keep losing. And that's the Sahel question here in this region of Africa below the Sahara. All right, Green Revolution, we talked about genetically modified organisms, taking the seeds. So I'll wait till the next slide to talk about what they did with rice. But actually changing the seed, and then the advent of fertilizers and pesticides has doubled crop production, okay? And that's some of the technology in commercial agriculture. Now the tractors and the combines, you can do so much more. A combine means it's a combination of a reaper, it mows up that, let's say, wheat, all right? And then it goes into this big giant, container with like these, I'm picturing like rubber baseball bats, and it's, beating the grain as it gets mowed in, separating the grain, the hard kernel, from the chaff, the grassy parts, and the grassy part blows out, and you have the grain left over, and then they put it into a truck and carry it away. So, it's just fascinating. Just in my lifetime, all tomatoes were picked by hand. San Joaquin County grew 90% of the tomatoes in the world. They turned a lot of it into spaghetti sauce and ketchup. All right, now that's all done by harvester, and you don't see as many tomatoes around here anymore because other crops are more valuable. Grapes, almonds, things like that. So not as many tomatoes as in the past, but technology has just been huge. Okay, here's what I wanted to talk about rice. So these guys in India figured out they could take a long grain rice from Indonesia, but it was really fragile. Disease, drought, it just was a wimpy grain of rice, but it was long, all right? The Taiwan rice was short and dense, and nothing killed it, all right? But it wasn't as tasty, and it was hard to chew on. So these guys just bred the two of them together, and farmers have been doing this forever in vegetative planting. You'll see it with trees out here east of Lodi. Walnut trees will have a black walnut root base because it can handle diseases, but the white walnut is much tastier, so that's the top of the tree. Farmers have been figuring that out for centuries, but then these guys in the laboratories are figuring out how to get the DNA of one grain of rice, the Indonesian long grain, and the short, stubby, tough, who would be a teacher like Mr. de Grandmont, all right, all right, that would be the Taiwanese rice, all right, and then blending them together, all right, the long, eloquent rice, Mr. Osterman, and the rice, the short one, Mr. de Grandmont, and you come up with the perfect rice, okay? All righty, that's still me, right? Okay, all right, so you talk to the dairy kids around here. We had one kid in class, and they had a small dairy with 1,000 cows. I'm like, 1,000 cows is a small dairy? But that's what's happened. What you see in Von Thunen's time, where you had several cows, or even my childhood, maybe a dozen or so, Those days are gone. What happens now is dairies have become bigger, all right, and so 1,000 is small. And between antibiotics, where you could keep a lot of animals together where they don't get sick, all right, growth hormones so that they produce more, all right, now you're seeing the amount of dairy farms go down and the amount of cows go down, but now cows can produce more, so you see the yield going up, all right? And that's good that we can produce more food, but that's also kind of scary about, okay, we're consuming those hormones and those antibiotics, and that's why we're having antibiotic issues at hospitals where antibiotics don't work anymore, and hormones, you're getting those hormones early. You can have an awkward conversation with your grandmother about your development and how it's happening so much faster. I'm sorry, but on this one, I'm gonna have to argue to go organic. I know, Chelly, you're not gonna like that, but on your milk, go organic, okay?
The hormones. Oh no. Okay, so here you can see water use in California. In California, we grow a huge amount. I think it's something like 2/3 of the fruits and nuts for the entire country, and about 1/3 of the vegetables. So we are the breadbasket of the United States. We grow a lot of food for a lot of people, and as a result, we use a lot of water. So we like to tease you guys about how long your showers are, and they are too long, okay? But 80% of our water usage is for agricultural purposes. So if you think of those numbers, 2/3 and 1/3, that's a lot considering how many people live in the United States, okay? So irrigation, we have moved water where we don't have water. So in the center of California, it's really kind of a very dry place, but we have brought water there. Okay, we've have the California Aqueduct that we've basically taken water from the northern part of California, we're moving it down to Southern California, and we are we're farming in between. Generally, we get water from two spots. So one is surface water, okay, and the other one is groundwater. And in like a normal year, we would get like 70% of our water from surface water, so from rain, rivers, and all that kind of stuff. But we've been in a drought. I mean, from 2011 to 2019, we've been in a drought. And so that number of 70% has been more like 40%. And so we've had to use more and more groundwater. And then Mr. Wright was telling you about some of the impacts of that. I remember watching a Huell Hauser special. He was talking about the Delta. They were showing areas where the levees were just sinking and compacting because we were pulling all that groundwater out of there.
Can I jump on my horse real quick?
You can.
Okay, so if you go down there, you can see where, this looks like citrus, but they're starting to grow a lot of almonds down there. And it's pretty shocking, like an almond from the time the tree is little to the time it grows and gets to market takes a gallon of water. That's our Northern California water going down there. And you can say, sure, Mr. Wright. My point is you could grow pistachios with less water. I think some less water. A farmer told me this. But pomegranates, they don't need nearly as much water. So, but they're trying to grow a crop that they make lots of money on. Maybe that's not always the best case.
Okay. Good. So this one is showing sustainable land management. So how do we preserve topsoil? How do we resist desertification? And they're showing you this one is no tillage, where they've harvested and then they've just kind of left the corn husks in this case on top of the ground. And what that does is it preserves the topsoil so when the wind comes along, it doesn't blow it away. The other one they might show you is ridge tillage, where there's essentially, right here would be like a ridge. And we actually learned that from the Africans when they came and were showing us how to grow rice and corn. They taught the Europeans how to do that. It also would keep pests away, from eating the roots, okay? So that ridge tillage, and then, creating those ridges, again, you're gonna preserve more topsoil because the wind's not gonna blow all that stuff in that little crevice away. We'll stop there.
Okay, and you can water without getting the fruit wet like strawberries on top of the ridge.